Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads. Lee here with new hair. My old stylist left to move to another salon. It's further out. I got a new stylist and I absolutely love it. Anywho, that's not why we're here. This month, June, is Pride Month. So far this month, I've read 4 books, all Pride related. Well, all LGBTQ plus related. And I'm gonna see, possibly, how long I can keep that going. Because one thing about books by or about LGBTQ plus authors is that they are very diverse. So it's not like I'm reading all horror all the time or all this all the time. So we'll see. Anyway, I'm kind of out of breath because I've been up since 5, but I've been going since like 8 this morning. I've done a little laundry. I've got dishes on to wash. I had a situation with the toilet upstairs. The little flapper is totally dead, so I had to go get a new one, replace that. It's just been a morning. Anywho, this week I read 4 books, and let's get started, shall we? The first was a book I've had for probably over a year. Love the cover, have been waiting to read it. This is A Sweet Sting of Salt by Rose Sutherland. And between reading this book and looking at the author's Instagram account, I really got a feel of the atmosphere, because some of her recent posts are, it's winter or still cold up there, at least when the post I was looking at, still cold and snowy. So I really got a sense of atmosphere as I was going into this book. I really enjoyed this. I've got to say, let me read you what it's about first. When a sharp cry wakes Jean in the middle of the night during a terrible tempest, she's convinced it must have been a dream. But when the cry comes again, Jean ventures outside and is shocked by what she discovers. A young woman in labor, drenched to the bone in the bitter cold, and able to speak barely a word of English. Although Jean is the only midwife for miles around, she's at a loss as to who this woman is or where she's from. Jean can only assume that she must be the new wife of her neighbor up the road, Tobias. When Tobias does indeed arrive at her cabin in search of his wife Muirin, Jean's questions continue to multiply. Why has he kept his wife's pregnancy a secret? And why does Muirin's open demeanor change completely the moment she's in his presence? Though Jean learned long ago that she should stay out of other people's business, her growing concern and growing feelings for Muirin mean that she can't simply set her worries aside. But when the answers she finds are more harrowing than she could ever have imagined, she fears she may have endangered herself, Muirin, and the baby. Will she be able to put things right and save the woman she loves before it's too late? Or will someone have to pay for Jean's actions with their life? So, retelling of the Selkie myth. So we know Muirin is the Selkie. I kind of wondered something, and I don't think it ever really got... I don't want to spoil it. But early on in Jean's life, there's an encounter with a seal. I kind of wondered if that seal was Muirin, but it doesn't tell you that. I believe this is a debut novel. I can't find anything else by the author. Loved it as a debut. I think that there were some things that were just okay to me. I thought that she developed feelings really quickly. What I did love, though, was... she got closure on a relationship that Jean did, she got closure on a relationship she'd had in her youth that she always felt bad about and felt guilty over, and that was satisfying. Now, the funniest part, to me being funny, I read the author's afterward, and she talks about a goat named Kicker being her favorite character. I could relate to that. But what really was funny to me is I had a kind of laissez-faire attitude about Tobias stealing a wife. I mean, it's an old folktale, so we know what happens. and men have stolen wives before. But then, so spoiler alert, Jean had 2 goats, Kicker and Honey. And then this motherfucker kills the nice goat. Kicker's not the nice goat. Kicker lives. But the other goat, Tobias kills. And that's when I turned against him. So, great debut novel. I recommend it if you are familiar with the Selkie myth, or if you're not. I do recommend this, although I recommend that you read the myth first so you'll know what you're getting when you go into. Next up was a new release. Let me just caveat here. I am going to do another video tomorrow. That'll be a book haul. I thought about doing 3 videos this week, but it's just too much with all the chores that I've left too long also. But my book haul tomorrow will be new releases. I'm trying to stick to only buying new releases. And so far this month, it's only day 8. I'm doing okay. Anywho, next up, I read a new release, Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is also a book. Taylor Jenkins Reid is bisexual, and I'll get back to this at the end with Someone is Mad on the Internet. Joan Goodwin has been obsessed with the stars for as long as she can remember. She's content with her life as a professor of physics and astronomy, and as an aunt to her precocious niece, Frances, until she comes across an advertisement seeking the first woman scientist to join NASA's space shuttle program. Suddenly, Joan burns to be one of the few people to go to space. Selected from a pool of thousands of applicants in the summer of 1980, Joan begins training at Houston Johnson Space Center alongside an exceptional group of fellow candidates. Top Gun pilot Hank Redmond and scientist John Griffin, easygoing even when the stakes are high. Mission specialist Lydia Danes, who has worked too hard to play nice. Warm-hearted Donna Fitzgerald navigating her own secrets. And Vanessa Ford, the magnetic and mysterious aeronautical engineer who can fix any engine and fly any plane. As they become unlikely friends and prepare for their first flights, Joan finds a love she never imagined. In this new light, Joan begins to question everything she thinks she knows about her place in the observable universe. Then in December of 1984, on mission STS-LR9, it all changes in an instant. They say it's fast-paced. I did not find it so. I found it medium-paced. Let me tell you this. Since I've been on this reading kick the last 5 years, this is only the second book where I had to ease my anxiety, skip to the end, and find something out. Because this is told in 2 different timelines. And I felt like this book, probably the first half, went really slowly. And it may be coincidental that when I checked at the end, I was more invested and I started reading faster. But I had another kind of slow book this week as well. So, I don't know, maybe something's going on with me. Or maybe it's just the writing. And both are fair. But I did have to skip ahead. And even though I did that, even though I knew the end, one of my favorite books of last year, I still wept with mixed feelings at the end. It's not going to spoil it for you. I definitely recommend it. Like I said, I'm going to come back and give you a small, teeny spoiler if you can't read between the lines, and in my Someone's Mad on the Internet segment. I'm also going to go on a bit of a rant probably then. Okay, alright, so next book. After Atmosphere, I have not read. This is the only light book I've read this week, and my current read is not any lighter. It's already made me cry and, well, tear up and mad. But this one didn't. Summer Girls is a sapphic YA novel, which was cute and light. It's an enemies to lovers, and it was just so refreshing compared to the deepness of A Sweet Sting of Salt and Atmosphere, and then the other 2 books. Glasses gone missing. Alright. Cass has a rule about dating summer girls. Just say no. Every year, her idyllic beach town is flooded with summer girls, the obnoxious daughters of the rich who stay in their families' summer homes, sail their yachts, and generally make things unbearable for townies like Cass. Birdie is the ultimate summer girl. She's the daughter of a wealthy real estate developer dad and a social media influencer mom. I love the social media books in small doses. And this summer, Birdie happens to be in big trouble for accidentally crashing her boyfriend's very expensive car. Birdie's punishment is to spend the summer with her father at the beach, but it won't be a vacation. He's crafted a list of rules, an actual contract, actually, for Birdie to follow. No car, no social medias, no social media, no parties, and enlisted the help of Cass. So Birdie's dad and Cass's dad are good friends despite being at odds on some stuff, and Cass's dad works for Birdie's dad. Anyway, all these rules to keep Birdie on the straight and narrow, including getting her a job at the public beach where Cass lifeguards. At first, the two despise each other. Birdie doesn't want a babysitter, and Cass doesn't want to be one. But as the season heats up, Birdie surprises Cass time and time again, and before long, both girls can't help but wonder, are some rules made to be broken? Yes, they are, especially when it comes to summer girls. Okay, bit of a minor rant here as well. The next book is our Book of the Month Club. What the hell am I saying? Is our book club's pick for Pride Month. It is one I've had on my shelves a long time as well, and that is Stephen Rowley's Guncle. I feel this way about this book the same way I felt about my first Abby Jimenez book, Just for the Summer. False advertising. Everything about this screams fun, light, rom-com-y-ish, called wise and hilarious. The font, the colors, this whole thing, it screams whimsical. And it was not a whimsical book. There are funny parts in there. I will tell you about one that actually made me laugh out loud, but the rest were amusing. But there's darkness in here too, and I wasn't prepared for that. I think I would have, when I approach Stephen Rowley again, I'm going to approach him the way I approached Abby Jimenez on the second book I read by her, knowing that the inside of the book is going to fuck me up a little bit and not to expect sweetness and light all through it, because this is about a very serious subject. Patrick O'Hara is a bit out of his league. Patrick, or Gay Uncle Patrick, Gup for short, has always loved his niece Maisie and nephew Grant. That is, he loves spending time with them when they come out to Palm Springs for week-long visits, or when he heads home to Connecticut for the holidays. So when tragedy strikes, and Patrick finds himself suddenly taking on the role of primary guardian, he is honestly overwhelmed. Patrick has no idea what to expect, having spent years barely holding on after the loss of his great love, important point, a somewhat stalled acting career, and a lifestyle not so suited to a 6- and 9-year-old. But when his waggish set of Guncle rules no longer appease Maisie and Grant's parental void, Patrick's eyes are open to a new sense of responsibility and the realization that sometimes even being larger than life means you're unfailingly human. Now let me just, minor spoilers, because I think it's important if you go into this book to know this first out. He talks about the loss of the love of his life. That guy's name was Joe. He lost his partner Joe years prior in a tragic accident. That's tragedy. Maisie and Grant's mother, also tragic, has just passed away from cancer. She lasted 3 years. She was only supposed to last 1. And their father is a drug addict, and he needs to go to rehab. That's how Patrick ends up with these kids. So what these kids are doing, it's not just living the Guncle lifestyle and walking around by the pool in caftans. It's also dealing with grief, both recent grief and unresolved grief. And I did not go into that expecting that to that level. But it's true. The kids act out. they are scared, they are sad, and Patrick is all those things as well. Especially because their mother was his best friend in college, and they'd only separated, or like kind of distanced from each other because of just time and other things. Two things I really liked about this. One, I wrote, I feel this in my bones. Patrick, his family lives in Connecticut. So does Greg, his brother, and Sarah before she passed. And when Patrick moved to Los Angeles, he flew home regularly for years, every 6 months or so, until he stopped, etc., etc., etc. It gave him the confidence to call out hypocrisy where he saw it. He came home. No one came to see him. After a while, he began to wonder what was the point. And I could totally relate to that, especially when I had family that was, my mother and father were alive. I would go home to wherever they were from, and then everybody would want me from deployments to go to their house, go visit, but no one ever came to see me, and still doesn't. So, anywho, I really related to it, and I was like, I feel this in my bones. The second part, there's a lot of humor in here, but I think I was so traumatized by the tragedy and the grief that I couldn't really appreciate it, except for this part. This is the first time in this book I laughed out loud. Other times I would just kind of smile. Why do you like boys? Grant asked. I don't know. Why do you like pizza? Because it tastes good in my mouth. Patrick wasn't about to go anywhere near that. I loved that part. Hilarious. Okay. Technically, the minute I am filming this, I have not yet finished this, but I've got less than an hour left on my audiobook, The Third Reich in Power by Richard J. Evans. I've been listening to this since the beginning of last month, and I am ready to be over with it, but I learned a great deal. You can't feel this, but this is a heavy book. I have read a lot about the Second World War, but most of my stuff seemed to cover the Weimar Republic, and then skip ahead to 1939. But this one really, let me read you what it is about. By the middle of 1933, the democracy of the Weimar Republic had been transformed into the police state of the Third Reich, mobilized around the cult of the leader, Adolf Hitler. In The Third Reich in Power, Richard J. Evans chronicles the incredible story of Germany's radical reshaping under Nazi rule, and it really is about that. It talks about everyday life under the Germans, not just the big points. As those who were deemed unworthy to be counted among the German people were dealt with in increasingly brutal terms, Hitler's drive to prepare Germany for the war that he saw as its destiny reached its fateful hour in September 1939. It says, this is the fullest and most authoritative account yet written of how, in 6 years, Germany was brought to the edge of that terrible abyss. And it really is. I mean, it's just, I'm going to go through and look at these pictures afterwards, but it covers things like religious affiliation in 1936, Nazi elite schools. It all talks, it's just so detailed and so good. Unexpected. Okay, so that is it for my weekend books. Technically, started and finished 4. Will have finished before the day is over this one. And then I'm going to take a break for, I say this all the time, but I'm going to take a break at least for a week, hopefully, from audiobooks, because I don't need to make that kind of major time commitment for right now. What I'm currently reading is still Pride Month themed, and that is Ruth Coker Burke's All the Young Men. The actual book is outside on my screen and porch. I had another book I was going to read, but I read the first couple of chapters, and I was like, no. And then I kind of spoil a little bit of the Gunkel But first, let me read you what this is about. If I can do so without crying, because when I made my little what I'm reading next short, I teared up. In 1986, 26-year-old Ruth visits a friend at the hospital when she notices a door to one of the rooms is painted red. A patient cries for his mother on the other side, but no one goes to help him. Ruth immediately steps into the quarantine space, comforting the young man in his last moments. Before she realizes what she's done, word spreads in the community that Ruth is the only person willing to help those young men afflicted by AIDS, and she's called upon to nurse them. Shuttling from patient to patient, Ruth forges deep friendships with the dozens of men she helps, working tirelessly to find them housing and jobs and burying their ashes in her family's own cemetery. She teaches sex ed to drag queens after hours at secret bars and defies local pastors and nurses to help the men she cares for, ultimately advising then Governor Bill Clinton on the national HIV/AIDS crisis and becoming a beacon of hope to an otherwise spurned group of ailing gay men on the fringes of an intensely conservative state. Speaking of, I just read this, and I didn't fact check it. It's in this book. But she says at the time, 1986, when this starts, that Arkansas had a law that could send men who engaged in consensual sex with other adult men to jail for 1 year. I've got to look that up. Anyway, so at the beginning of this, it tells you, so this is not a spoiler for this. She goes to give comfort to that young man who's dying, and she calls his mother to let his mother know she's dying, and the mother is like, that thing is dead to me. And it's so infuriating and tragic that I'll probably try to save my rant on how horrible it is that some churches teach hate. And in the Guncle, in a flashback, there are quite a few flashbacks in here, when Joe is in the hospital, Patrick isn't allowed to be in there with him because the family doesn't agree with Joe's lifestyle. I put that in air quotes. Anywho, I'm going to try to lift it up a little bit, but I probably will still go on a rant because it is time for my segment, Someone is Mad on the Internet. And I try to take these from Goodreads because I feel like people who have Goodreads accounts are actually readers as opposed to Amazon. So, if you could not read between the lines, this is a sapphic romance. And it is not very clear. It's not crystal clear. There's no sign on this that says sapphic romance. It says a love story. Period. Someone was mad on the internet because this is a sapphic love story. And if you pick this up knowing that it was a love story, and then when you found out it was a sapphic love story, you put it down because you don't like that, or you don't agree with that, or you don't want to read about it, what is wrong with you? Why can't you? I love to read about people who are not me and have different lives and different experiences. Anywho, that is all for me. My camera just went dark, which means it is tired of, I'm trying to read what it says. I don't know what it says. It's tired of recording and it's time for me to stop, it says. Anywho, if you've stuck with me this long, as always, thank you for sticking with me on my journey, and happy reading.